Hey everybody, it's John Schumacher here with NewWaveHealthcare.com, and just want to give you guys a quick reminder that we are a video podcast. So if you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher Radio, head over to NewWaveHealthcare.com to check out all of our video interviews. We have over 40 interviews there on all kinds of topics in healthcare, entrepreneurship. We also link up all of our guests' resource information, contact information, and all of the resources mentioned during our interviews. So head on over there, check it out, NewWaveHealthcare.com. All right, let's get started. Today, our guest, I'm really excited about. This will be a content topic, a topic discussion rather, with John Cote, who is the creator and host of Healthcare Elsewhere, which is a medical tourism podcast where John interviews doctors, medical experts, and patients from all over the world to talk to them about getting their procedures done in other areas. So whether that's in another state, in another country. Some people can't afford a certain procedure in their area or don't have the availability of a procedure, so they've had to travel elsewhere to get that kind of medical care. And John does a daily podcast where he talks to these folks and shares their stories. And his podcast just recently passed over the 100,000 download mark, which is absolutely outstanding, in just 10 weeks. So our discussion today is going to be on podcasting and how John created this idea and went through the process to get to this monumental mark that he is today. He's also the founder and CEO of Rocket Social Marketing and a #1 bestseller on Amazon. So he's got a marketing background that he's blended with this podcasting project that's really helped him skyrocket himself to amazing success in a really important area that a lot of people don't know a lot about, and that's medical tourism. So John's going to come on, share a little bit of how he did it for anybody out there who's interested in creating their own podcast, and we're going to have a lot of fun doing it. So John, thanks so much for coming on today. Let's just have you start off, just share a little bit about you personally, and then we'll jump into this whole podcast journey of yours.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. Hey, John, I really appreciate you having me on the show. It's great to be here. And so, yeah, for me, as you mentioned, we kind of started from a marketing background. Before that, I was in the military and was a pilot, and had gotten into being a pilot basically for a major U.S. airline. And then 9/11 happened, and when that happened, it kind of really opened my eyes to the fact that, hey, I could lose my job, my company could go under, that I was working for. So that sort of started me on my entrepreneurial journey. And so fast forward to 2008, I started helping people with Facebook fan pages and marketing and things like that. And then I started speaking at local meetup groups and chambers of commerce and whatnot, and that led to a book which became a #1 bestseller on Amazon, which was really interesting and neat. But the reason that ties into this was because I got a cold call one day from a woman who runs a medical tourism association. Basically, she has a convention every year that covers something like 2,500 attendees from over 75 countries, and she typed in the term word-of-mouth advertising speaker or something along those lines into Google, and that was in the subtitle of my book. And so she found my book, she bought my book, read it, and just cold called me and said, hey, would you be interested in coming to talk at our medical tourism conference in Las Vegas? This was going to be last November. So I said, well, sure, absolutely, be happy to do that. So I was there as a guest to speak on basically on marketing, on how to help people find their way and basically get people to find them online without coming across as being salesy. So it was very story-based and everything. And one of the things that I talked about in my PowerPoint presentation, my keynote presentation, was, look, podcasting is really blowing up. They're really getting a large number of people are starting to use podcasts or listen to podcasts and use them as a way to communicate with people. So this is something you should really take a look at and do. And everyone was like, wow, that's really great. We love that. I'm going to really take a look at doing that and this and that. And the reason that I told them that was because when you go to iTunes and type in medical tourism, basically nothing showed up. There were no podcasts. Nobody was doing anything about it. So I waited about 3 months, and so January of this year rolls around, and nobody had done anything. No new podcasts about medical tourism. And I said, you know what? Let me show them as a demonstration that this is a great way to put out content and get people to find out who you are. So I wanted to do it specifically because I'm not a medical expert at all. I don't have any medical training. I had a passion for the subject because my wife was a 2-time cancer survivor. I had actually had stem cells implanted into my knee to repair some damaged cartilage and things. And then we also adopted our 3 children from overseas. and had a lot of issues dealing with all the different medical issues there. So, long story short, that passion drove me to say, okay, well, why don't I do this podcast and interview people about medical tourism to show, others in the marketplace what is possible, what kind of content you can make that you can just put out there for free that will help drive traffic into your system without feeling all salesy and late night TV, kind of advertising stuff. So it was kind of an experiment, and I did it on a leap of faith almost, because I wasn't sure what kind of reaction I would get since nobody else was doing anything like this. And, as you mentioned, we just passed our 10th week and had our 100,000th download, which was kind of surprising and interesting and phenomenal, and we're all excited about it. So in a nutshell, that's kind of how we got started in this whole thing.
Right. Yeah, there's not a lot of healthcare related podcasts out there. I mean, you said you typed in medical tourism into iTunes and nothing came up. Mm-hmm. And it's just amazing how little there is in healthcare right now as far as podcasts or audio in general as a way to tell the story and get that content out. I know Jamie Davis is one who does quite a few podcasts, but there's not a whole lot of content in this industry, and so obviously you saw a need there, and they even got excited about it too, but like in so many cases they didn't take any action on it, so you just picked up the ball and said, you know what, I'm going to put it on my shoulder. I have a passion, I have a drive for this particular topic, and I'm going to push through it and rock it, man, and you're doing it. So did you have any reservations at all before you started this? Because you don't have a medical background, you have a lot of passion and marketing knowledge, but did you worry about that at all, or did you just say the hell with it and just ran with it?
Yeah, I kind of said the hell with it, honestly. I mean, I haven't gotten it really yet, but I'm expecting at some point. I mean, we're starting to get more and more people are listening to the show, and we're getting more and more interest, and people are starting to call me and ask me to become, on their podcast. We're getting some media interview requests. And at some point, I'm sure we're going to have some medical expert come on and say, well, who are you to say, and talk about medical tourism? You're not a doctor. You're not a medical expert. And no, I'm not. And I totally say that and completely and freely admit that to everybody and say, look, all I do is interview people and let them tell their story. And I let the experts tell their, from their perspective, what people should be looking for. And it's really very story-based and very patient-centric. I mean, it's easy to get someone who's, a PhD in this and an expert in that. And if we waited for those people to do a podcast like this, it would never get done. And we know this because medical tourism has been around for a long time, and very, like less than half of Americans are even aware of the concept that it even exists. And they just don't have the bandwidth or the expertise to pull something like this off. Not that they don't have the knowledge, they certainly and clearly do, but a lot of times they get into talking about the minutia and the terminology and the technology, and that's not really where the interest lies. I mean, when you think about your favorite movie of all time, whether that be a drama or a romantic comedy or an action movie or whatever it is, there are certain parts of that story that compel you to remember that, and you watch it over and over and over again because it's your favorite movie, because it relates and gives you some kind of an emotional response. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is to let the people, our guests, our patients, our experts, to come on, tell a success story about something that's happened. Like our very first episode was a woman who had MS, who was supposed to be in a wheelchair 4 or 5 years ago, who went down to Panama to get stem cell therapy because it wasn't approved here in the United States, and she's not in a wheelchair. I mean, she's living a successful life. She can have, a coherent conversation with people. She's still working. She can still walk around under her own power. And so those are just inspiring and really cool stories to hear. And so even if you're not interested in medical tourism, I think there's a lot of people who are listening just because they get to hear a really cool, hopefully inspiring story of someone who overcame, in some cases, incredible odds. And sometimes it's just people talking about, well, hey, yeah, I was going to get, dental crowns or whatever, and it was going to cost 30 grand, and I couldn't afford that, so I went down to Costa Rica and got it done for 5 grand. Well, hey, people are interested by that. They saved a lot of money. They didn't have to deal about the, Affordable Care Act or whatever. And so I just think that's one of the reasons why it's kind of resonated with people, because of the fact that the stories are so interesting and compelling, hopefully.
Right, yeah. Stories are so powerful, right? I mean, just hearing even, like you say, the story, or even just a little clip that you mentioned about the MS lady gets people perked up and inspired by that. So I think that's excellent content and good information too. So, and good for you for going for it too. I know a lot of people, you get what, like what John Lee Dumas calls the imposter syndrome, right? Where you don't feel like you're worthy, which is a good way to put it, really, right? Because I mean, like if you got hung up on that, you would have never started. And I see that a lot with people who get caught up, and I'm not good enough, or I don't know enough. And we all can
Hmm.
catch bits of that, I think, but in reality, you got to have enough strength to kind of push through that, because really you're just providing a platform, right? You're providing a platform for these people to share a story. You're not claiming to be the expert. Like, just for on my show, I'm not claiming to be, an expert in any one area like health tech or marketing, but I know a lot
Yeah.
about all of those things, and we're providing a platform there to help push that message out. So that's just so powerful. I think that's
Yep.
people need to remember that before they start, is that you're providing a platform and a service, and you're going to get better, and you're going to attract people to you. And I bet you've learned a hell of a lot about the medical field just from interviewing people, huh?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we had a few clients in the marketing world who were, they were either cosmetic dentists or plastic surgeons and stuff like that, but nothing along the lines of, anything that we were doing with medical tourism. And I'm not a professional interviewer or anything. I mean, I like to talk, but I mean, other than that, I'm not any kind of professional. I've done a lot of video work, for clients and for ourselves and promoting our stuff. And I've done a lot of speaking engagements from the stage, but I don't have any professional training. I'm nobody special or anything like that. I mean, I was a
Oh,
Marine.
come on,
If
you
a
are
Marine
too.
can write a best-selling book and get on stage and talk, I mean, anybody can do it. So, you really need to just kind of, take a subject that you're passionate about, find a niche and an angle that's going to be interesting to people, and then tell good stories. And I think the rest kind of just falls into place. And, like you said, of course, with the marketing background, I've had experience with launching products, launching services, and things like that. So I just took that information, and I didn't know anything about podcasting. So, when I saw John Dumas's interview with Mike Koenig's about how he was going out and doing these podcasts and using it to drive traffic for a bunch of different things, I immediately clicked and went, wow, I've never really been a big podcast guy, but this is a great way to do this. And so, all of a sudden, I just kind of fell into this medical tourism niche, and it was wide open. Nobody else is doing it. And so now all of a sudden we have people contacting us. Before we even launched, actually, we were doing a whole launch process on Facebook to generate likes, which would then we'd convert them into listeners on the show. And our hope was that we'd get up into new and noteworthy, up in the top categories of iTunes and everything. And it worked great. But before we actually even launched the show, we were getting people reaching out to us on Facebook and saying, hey, we own a medical tourism company here in India or Thailand or wherever. And, we heard about your show, or we saw your show. And even after we did launch, we got more people saying, yeah, we listened to your show. We think it's great, good content. We'd love to, A, be interviewed. B, we looked you up online. We just typed your name in, and we found your book. We read your book. We found your marketing agency, and we would like to talk with you about consulting with us as a marketing consultant to help us with our marketing and creating this kind of content so that we can help, bring people into our pipeline. And that was exactly the intent. I mean, I did it because I was passionate about it, but also obviously we wanted to monetize it. And so we're already getting sponsorship requests, and we have some proposals out for that right now. But that's how we're monetizing this and making it worth our while. So we worked really hard for 2 months to get ourselves up to the point of launch. And actually it was about 10 weeks from the time that we said, okay, we're going to go ahead and do this, to the time we actually put our first podcast episode up. We put the first 3 episodes up and then waited to see, well, what's going to happen. And we had a whole launch process. We had a contest and everything. And, we got enough downloads in those first couple of days to get to #1 in new and noteworthy for medicine and alternative medicine and a couple other categories. So it's really worked out well for us. And as we've continued to grow the show, we just keep getting more and more people contacting us and asking us how they can work with us and to do these kinds of things. So we're just absolutely loving it.
Yeah. Okay, well, take us to that level then. I mean, take us down to the beginning. Let's kind of go through the process you went through to start this, because a lot of people are probably curious. I mean, how do you get 100,000 downloads in 10 weeks? And you talked a little bit about using Facebook, using contests, and using those type of tools to generate pre-launch interest in your show, which I wish I would have known about when I started this thing. I started, I started last October just doing videos, and then just went on iTunes January 1st, but I didn't have any of that kind of a background. So talk about that. Like, can you take us down to that ground level of when you started this out, you said, yes, I'm going to do this. You had your niche. You were ready to take action.
Mm-hmm.
What did you do?
Sure. So the first thing I did was I had gotten a hold of John Lee Dumas and talked to him. He was a fellow military veteran. He was kind enough to give me a few minutes of his time and just kind of talk with me a little bit back and forth in a chat session about, who he was and what he was all about. And so for me, I definitely believe in investing in my education. If there's something that I see that's interesting, don't recreate the wheel. Find the expert in the field that you resonate with and buy their course. And so I totally did that, bought his course, went through probably about a third of it because about 2/3 of it were things that I already knew about. I had the technical know-how on how to do a lot of things. But don't get hung up on, well, I don't know how to use, should I use, Audition by Adobe, or should I use Audacity, but which is free, or should I use this? What kind of camera should I use? What kind of microphone should I use? I mean, all that stuff can work itself out. Pick something, it doesn't matter, and go with it. And if it doesn't work for you, then throw that away and get something else.
Right.
But take massive action and don't get analysis by paralysis would be the first bit of advice that I could give people. So I kind of looked at some of the things he was doing. I set up some systems to help us with getting the interview request set up. I hired a virtual assistant. The first one we got didn't work out, so I let him go, and then hired a different woman to work with us, and that worked out great.
Where did you get the assistant?
I actually had discovered Chris Ducker's book, and I forget the name of it, Virtual Freedom, I think it is,
Yep.
and contacted his company, and I don't know, and I'm not an affiliate of his or anything like that, just to be on the up and up here, but I think it was like $350 or $400, and we paid them a fee for them, and we said, this is what we're looking for. I need a virtual assistant that can help me with general stuff and podcast production, and so they gave us 3 returns back to what we were looking for. We interviewed them. They came with all kinds of, they had their profiles, psychological profiles, and everything all pre-done and ready to go. We interviewed them. One of them was perfect. We hired her, got her up to speed, did some training with her, and it took a week or 2 to get her up to speed, and we didn't expect it to be perfect, but she had the experience level that we were looking for as far as her English skills, and I knew I could train her on all the rest, and that's exactly what we did. And so by doing that, after the first couple of weeks, I didn't have to worry about the podcast production all the time. And someone like that you can get for around, I think we're paying her, I think, $650 a month for her, and that may be more than some people are paying their VAs or less than others, depending on the experience level. But the point was, she had what we needed as far as an experience level and a skill set, and we were able to convert that into someone that can reliably help me churn out these episodes. So I do the interviews, she helps me schedule them. She's just starting now to help me find more people to interview, and she does most of the show notes and puts all the the WordPress page together and all that other stuff, because that takes a lot of time. And if you're an entrepreneur, you don't have the bandwidth to be messing with that stuff. What you need to be doing is building your business and interviewing the people you need to interview, and let somebody else handle all that other stuff. So for $650 a month, that was totally worth it to me, to have somebody that I found that I could trust and you would do a great job. And she's been fantastic. It's worked out great for us. So if you're to that point where you're trying to build your podcast and you want to monetize it, I understand we all come from different points of monetization levels. But for us, I mean, we hired a professional company to help us with the first month, and they did a great job. And then we got to the point where I had a friend who was helping me out, and that didn't work as well, as he just didn't have the bandwidth to deal with it. And then we hired this first virtual assistant. And so it took us a little while to kind of find our pulse, I guess, to get to the point where it was just kind of running almost on autopilot. And we're finally getting there now after we've had, about 62 or 63 episodes. So, it just takes a little while. So, you're going to have mistakes. You're not going to be perfect. Please do not also, when you're editing your episodes, especially when you start doing them yourself initially, you can go in there and try and take out every and ah and pause and breath, and you'll be there all day doing 1 half-hour episode. Everyone does it. Your first, okay, learn the system, fine. Now you know how to do it. Hire somebody else to do it, or if you're going to do it yourself, don't be that perfectionist. Good enough is good enough. It doesn't have to be so, just perfect where it sounds like it's NPR or something like that. And I think a lot of people, and that's great if you strive for that, but you also need to make money. I mean, you need to monetize this thing. You have too many other things going on.
And if you're focused on that stuff with editing out every little thing, you're focusing on the wrong thing, right? I mean, you got to put out, you need to put out good content. I mean, I don't edit any of this hardly. Like I could say la 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 whatever, on this, and it's just what we are. This is who we are, So I think editing it in a way dilutes the authenticity and just the realness of the conversation. So I just, people get so caught up on the actual production and should I use what microphone or which platform should I use, video, audio. Just start and then adjust, right? Just like you did. You started, you made mistakes, people didn't stick with you for a while, and that's okay. You know, some people didn't work out, you know, that's okay, but you kept going, you kept producing content, you kept moving forward, and you found the right people, and now you're really exploding. So just take action, guys. Don't be like worried about every little thing. Make sure that every little piece of your puzzle is fits perfectly before you go, because it just the time is never perfect, and the stars never do align perfectly. You just be okay being imperfect, you know. So I think
pick a launch date, give yourself a reasonable expectation. You know, how many shows a week are you going to do? How many shows do you need to have in the can before you get started? How long do you think it's going to take to do all those? Have a reasonable expectation, but set a launch date and stick to it. Because if you miss that launch date, it's really easy. John talks about this in his book and in his stuff about how, you know, oh well, it's just another week. Nobody knows, it's not out yet. It's just another week. It's just another week, and it's easy to procrastinate yourself into months of all of a sudden it's like, well, I haven't launched yet, but it's okay. No, it's not okay. Set a date and make it happen. Take massive action and just do it. And that's really, you know, and it's not going to be perfect, and that's okay. It's good enough. Get it out there.
Yeah. So let's get back to your journey here a little bit.
Sure.
So you hired a VA, you got your people in place, and then how did you get all that traffic to your pre-launch? I mean, you used Facebook and you used a contest. Can you briefly touch on those strategies?
So, I mean, we're a marketing agency, so I know how to do Facebook ads, but I also was really busy doing all this stuff. I didn't have the bandwidth to sit here and set up, you know, a multi-ad, you know, group campaign of 15 different ads with all these different, you know, text edits and pictures and all this other stuff to see what was going to work the best. So I hired a company who, you know, someone that I knew did a great job, and she'd been doing this for quite some time. So we, you know, talked to her about the whole pre-launch strategy and everything, where we were trying to do, where we were trying to go, what we were trying to do. I gave her an overall feel of the whole thing, and then I let her run with it, and I gave her a budget and said, let's go. So, you know, we had set this up ahead of time and said, okay, we want to, you know, we want to make a splash, and we want to be number one on day one or day two. So we put, I think it was about $3,000 we paid for that initial stuff to get it going. Now, you don't have to do that. You can do it through other social media. You can do it for free. I just didn't have the bandwidth to sit there and try and build it from the ground up, and wasn't interested in doing that over a long period of time. I wanted to make a splash immediately, and so I committed some funds ahead of time to do production work, to hire VAs, to do artwork. You know, we did a 99 designs contest, you know, once we came up with the name of our podcast in the show, and we're creating a book, and we can talk about that later if you want, out of this whole thing. So there was definitely, you know, from point A, we said, okay, we're going to create a brand that's going to be a global brand that is going to have 3 or 4 different monetization strategies that we can also talk about as well if you're interested. But, you know, we wanted to build it from the ground up as something that we could build into something that would be very large. And at some point, if somebody was interested enough, say, hey, we want to buy you out, well, okay, I'm always willing to have that conversation as well. And so, you know, we did the Facebook ad thing. It was about $3,000. We also worked with Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram. Our Pinterest and Instagram didn't work probably as much as we had hoped, because we just didn't have the bandwidth and time to put into it. So it was our fault. It's not that those platforms don't work. We just didn't spend as much time on them as we had hoped. As far as the contest goes, we did everything by the book. You know, we've run contests before, and for whatever reason, we just didn't get up. The whole point of the contest was to try and get reviews, and we got some reviews off of it, but not nearly as many as we had hoped. And again, it wasn't only, you know, give us a good review and then you get a chance. No, it was just, hey, just give us a review, you know, send us a screenshot that you sent us the review, and then you'll get entered in the contest. We were giving away a Kindle Fire and like 8 or 10 other smaller prizes that we gave away every day during the launch process. And, you know, so it generated a lot of buzz, but it didn't lead to a lot of actual reviews, but we did get some reviews out of it. So I wouldn't consider it a failure. It just didn't drive as many as we had hoped. We also started using Twitter. I kind of didn't really use Twitter all that much to start with. About 4 weeks after we launched, we really got a better plan together and started working with Twitter more, and that really helped to raise the profile of the show and the number of downloads that we got. We were fortunate that we got called by Podcasting Magazine, just kind of called me out of the blue. I was vaguely familiar with Drew Griffin, who's the publisher, and he just kind of said, hey, I've got this new Apple, you know, magazine that we're putting out about podcasting. We'd love to have you, would you like to be on the cover? Well, yeah, that'd be great. Sure. So they did an interview with me similar to how we're doing now, and they put it on, I was on the cover of Podcasting Magazine, and that all coincided about 4 weeks in, and it really shot our numbers up right around that time. So that was a really big help. So just being out there and being accessible and, and doing interviews with you and other people like you really just helps to raise your profile. And you never know where that next big thing is going to come from that's going to help, shoot you up on the numbers like that. It's just kind of random sometimes.
Right. Yeah, and just get out there and start, like you say, taking things like this, or getting out there and getting yourself known, being a guest on other podcasts, reaching out, just like you've done, is a great way to do it. And I think a lot of what you've done has just been amazing. You've had a group around you to do that. I think a lot of people probably aren't in that situation, like when they're starting. So for them, I mean, you just got to start smaller. Like you say, you might not be able to run a huge Facebook campaign, but I know a lot of people I've talked to. I've done this a little bit myself. I've run Facebook ads with their content and getting good results with that, or Twitter, like you said, has been a popular way for people to build their Twitter following. I know myself, I've been using the Unfollow app a little bit to build my following faster in the Twitter market, and that's been a good way to kind of push out.
I'll have to look at that one. I hadn't seen that one before. We were using TweetAdder, I think it was, and I got somebody set up with that and helping us with that. Same kind of thing, I think.
Yeah, so there's a lot of applications and software you can use, like Buffer app or these type of things, to help schedule your content and put it out there. Because I think a lot of the times, I know one of the mistakes I made in the beginning was I would produce a lot of content every week, but I wasn't getting it out there. I wasn't spending enough time distributing it. I would put it out once on Twitter, and then it would be it. And I'm like, well, why is my download numbers not working? So in my experience, at least this far, it's been you have to spend at least half your time promoting your content, posting content, sharing content in other areas.
Yeah. Let me add something to that too, John. You bring up a great point. I mean, a lot of times people will say, well, should I use Libsyn or just SoundCloud or whatever? And I'm like, no, use them all. And they're like, well, why would I do that? And I believe in the concept I was taught. It's called You Everywhere Now. You want to be on as many possible platforms as you can, because you never know where you might have an audience. If you want to be wherever your audience wants to listen to you. And maybe they have an Android phone and they don't listen to iTunes because they have an Android phone. So if the only place you are is iTunes, I don't know what the numbers are, but I think like 2/3 of all phones on the planet are Android. So if you're only on iTunes, you're leaving out 2/3 of your potential listeners. So we decided early on to get involved. We applied for and were accepted into the beta for SoundCloud, and then we also were in Stitcher Radio, and we're in I think 12 or 13 different platforms right now. Some of them contacted us after they saw the numbers going up and said, hey, we'd love to feature you as one of our things. Here's your feed, and here you go, and off you go. And then we also are on a whole bunch we have a Tumblr, a blog, and we're on again Instagram and Pinterest and some of these others, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and everything else. And so we want to just be in as many places as we possibly can, because you never know where people might discover you and what that might lead to on down the line.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. And I'm sure the majority of your downloads do come from iTunes. I'm pretty sure of that, but it is helpful to have profiles in different areas. But I think, like you say, I mean, you can give me your thoughts on this, is that, for a lot of people starting out, that, like you said, they just got to start. So if you're just starting with iTunes and Stitcher, just start and then add those different, pour a little water in the other buckets as you go along, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, don't wait till you have them all set up. I mean, we certainly didn't do that. I did not launch on a dozen platforms and everything else. I was on 2 or 3 platforms and a couple of, Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Pinterest and Instagram, and that was it. And so then we've kind of added as we've gone along, as we've been able to have the bandwidth to do it. And again, you can do a lot of these things without spending any money, because I know some of the people are going to be very budget conscious. Yep. And again, it's not like we're just going out there and throwing money at this thing. We did have a plan, and we had a budget that we set to go ahead and do this, and where we wanted to be and how we wanted to monetize it. But our plan is eventually, as we start monetizing it, we are going to start putting out more ads, paid ads, and things like that, to continue to drive the listenership, which will help increase the revenue that we can raise through sponsorship, which then helps increase the number of people who want to work with us from a consultative perspective and things like that. So. Right,
exactly, yeah, and like you say, I mean, just start, guys. I mean, you might start slower than John did, in your situation, or depending on the time and your budget and everything. But just like I started with nothing, didn't know anybody, just hired a coach to teach me a couple things before I launched, and that was about it, and just started. And
Yeah.
it's been slow, it's been steady progress and stuff. But even with even with the download numbers that I have, I mean, I'm still finding clients. People are still reaching out to me. I've been working with healthcare companies and healthcare entrepreneurs with their marketing, online marketing, and social media and stuff like that. I mean, people will reach out to you, especially if you're in a vertical market like John's in and then like I'm in. We're in a very vertical market, so your download numbers might be a little different than people who are in horizontal markets. Would you agree with that, John? Or
Yeah, absolutely. And just because, I mean, I'm not pulling in John Lee Dumas numbers by any stretch. The guy does, I don't know, 7, 10 million downloads a year, whatever. I'm nowhere anywhere close to that. But the market, and he has a very tightly focused group. You talk about his avatar and who he decided. And his avatar, when he defined it, it was actually much more defined than what I could figure out for mine. I mean, we did sit down and kind of say, and with my mastermind group and say, all right, well, who are we targeting here, really? I mean, it's like, well, anyone who's interested in getting affordable, safe, and cutting-edge healthcare. Well, that's a lot of people, and that's not focused enough. So I tried to focus it down as much as I could, but at some point I was just like, I know I should be focusing this more, but I can't. I just can't seem to do it, and it's time to launch. So I'm just going to launch, and we'll see what happens. And in spite of that, we seem to, we managed to find an audience that seems to be compelled and interested in coming back over and over and over again. And so, it's worked out for us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think people get hung up on that too. I think it is important to niche and to find your ideal customer, your ideal avatar. But some people know right away, but some don't. So even with that, don't let that stop you. Launch, put out content, read the market. People will tell you if they like it or not, and then you can adjust your strategy from there, because sometimes you just don't know. I mean, when I launched, I was targeting healthcare entrepreneurs, and then who is that, right? Like I didn't know.
Yeah.
Started to put it out there. And realized that wasn't the best niche, so I pivoted to health technology, and then I pivoted again even. So I mean, and we're for some of us, it's not always clear. So I think that people get so frustrated and hung up with the whole, I need to define clearly my avatar before I do anything, and it is important, but don't let that stop you. Start putting out content with what you want to talk about. Pick someone to serve, pick someone to target, and then you can pivot around from that.
Yeah, absolutely. And for us, I still don't know that we've really tightly defined exactly who our avatar is. I mean, clearly some of these are people who are interested in medical tourism from a business perspective because they're in the industry. And many of them, for example, are from the MS community because I reached out to an MS forum and said, hey, we'd be interested in interviewing any of your members who would be wanting to talk about traveling to another country to get stem cell therapy. Well, I had like 10 people reply and say, yeah, I want to be on the show. Holy cow. So all of a sudden we had a huge number of people who were interested in, that's a highly targeted and focused environment you're talking about. And, of course, we're not the stem cell tourism show. We're all about medical tourism, and so we want to cover a wide variety. But for a time, those were the types of people who kept calling and saying, yeah, we'd be interested in being on the show. And so those who were the ones who were getting featured. And so we're constantly, I think, kind of on a side note, the biggest struggle that we've had is finding enough people who are willing to come on the show and talk about their experience. I mean, it's just a constant battle to try and keep the pipeline filled with new content. When you're trying to do a daily show. Actually, we recently, a couple of weeks ago, we went down to the point where we're doing it just Monday, Wednesday, Friday, because I just didn't have enough content because for a time, we just weren't having enough people come in and interview. And that's my own fault. I just didn't set up my pipeline well enough to have enough people coming in to deal with 365 interviews in a year. We're hoping to get it to that point, get far enough ahead again where we can go back to being a daily podcast. But it hasn't, interestingly, really affected our numbers all that much. We're still getting a large number of downloads every day. Where you look back and historically, people are going back and watching the older episodes, and I think they're finding them online when they type in a search for MS and stem cell and things like that. I think some of those older shows are still showing up in Google results. So.
Right. Yep. So take us then. So let's see here. Where were we? We kind of got off our track here.
Yeah, sorry. We were talking about kind of the beginning and how I got all started there.
Yes. So you brought it up to, let's just kind of take it into the middle then. So you did these contests, you did some ads and stuff like that, mm-hmm. And then as you were, take us to kind of where you are, I guess now. Like, what are some of your current strategies for sharing? And then let's talk a little bit about monetizing as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, what we do is we have a set email that we send out to our guests, a couple of days before their episode is going to go live. Hey, don't forget, your big day is almost here. Your episode is about to go live. So we lean on our guests quite a bit and say, look, you're under no obligation of any kind to share this with anyone or whatever, but we assume that you want to at least tell your mom and your dad and your friends and your family. So here's some suggested links or some links to your show. Here's some suggested tweets and Facebook posts and things like that. You can totally, edit them, do it the way you want. Some people are just so busy, they mean to do it, they just don't get to it. So we ask all of our guests if they wouldn't mind going ahead and posting for both business and pleasure purposes to just kind of say, hey, I was on this show, we talked about this, you can listen to it here. Tweet it, Instagram, Pinterest, wherever you want to send it out, but go ahead and send it out. And once we had that into a defined thing where we were consistently doing it all the time, that was right around the time where we really started getting a spike in downloads. And I think that is really helpful. And by putting it in a format that was easy for them to just literally cut and paste, and then they could add a couple little, their own words in there, that really helped. Because if you just say, hey, please tell everyone about the show that you were just on, most people mean well, they mean to get out there and do it, they just don't follow through. They just don't have the time or the bandwidth, they just forget. So that was one of the big things that we kind of stumbled across. And John Dumas had mentioned it because he never asked anybody in the first couple of months he was starting either. He just never really did it. And he goes, wow, I never thought of that. So we did it a little bit in the beginning, but we did it more and more as we've been moving along. Twitter's been a big strategy for us. Yeah, go ahead. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was just going to say, so with that, is that one of the main causes for your spike? Like, because I saw your numbers, you posted them in the Podcasters Paradise group, but you've
Yeah.
had, has that been one of the main ones, or?
I mean, all these things, I think it was really a group of things that all kind of happened concurrently. You had being on the cover of Podcasting Magazine, so you had some interest from people within the podcast community just saying, well, who is this guy and what's this all about? So there was some of that. There was some of the, guest sharing and things, Facebook posts. Some of those were paid. Some of those were organic. Reaching out through Twitter, and sending links out and everything like that, and just talking about different topics, and hitting on the important hashtags that we thought would be relevant and stuff. So, and then just, again, being on shows, that was really when I started getting asked to be on interviews, to do other shows and things like that. We had a couple of, somewhat celebrity individuals from the West Coast who were fairly well known in the marketing community. One of them is a doctor of integrative medicine who is a best-selling author. So, she had quite a following. He had quite a following. Those numbers helped to spike. And all those things kind of happened all in the same week. And we were kind of shocked all of a sudden. We, woke up the next day and it was like, the numbers were just climbing through the roof. And every day they just kept getting bigger and bigger. And, right now we're peaking around in the 3,500 range per day, and it's continuing to grow. We'd like to see that get up into the 5,000 and 10,000 per day as we continue. But for right now, obviously this is it. Actually, honestly, after just 10 weeks, it's more than we had expected. I'm very happy about the growth, and looking to see how we can continue to grow it even more. And I think part of that is, as now that we have some bigger numbers, I have like some screenshots of Healthcare Elsewhere right next to Tim Ferriss's, podcast, and he wrote a couple of chapters in 4 Hour Body about medical tourism. So I'm going to contact his people and see if we can get him on the show and start trying to bring other people who are bigger and more well known than me to help, drive traffic that way. So, as far as the traffic goes, it's hard for me to pin down one thing because we were doing a lot of things all at the same time. They all seem to kind of come together at the same time to create this tsunami of traffic, which then kind of peaked at around the 3,000 to 3,500 day level for the last few weeks, and we seem to be comfortably hanging there, no problem. Now we're going to see where we can take it, to the next level. As far as the monetization aspect of it, we had quite a few companies contact us about sponsorship, and I said, look, I don't have any idea what our numbers are going to be. Let's get back together in 2 months when we have a better idea of what this all looks like. And so we've been reaching out to those companies and have several of them that we're having conversations with about sponsorship. One of them wants to just sponsor the whole show, like a 15-second pre-roll and a 30 or 60-second mid-roll at a certain level per month. And we're basically looking at the CPM model and just saying, hey, it's going to be so many dollars per 1,000 downloads, and we're still kind of negotiating on what that number might. But, we kind of looked at, again, we have a very targeted audience, so this is what we're going to be charging. We also have several companies that have hired us now to do marketing consulting, like we were talking about. So now we're helping them on a consultative basis on how to create this kind of content, how to distribute this kind of content in all the different places, and, basically to do patient testimonials and all these things that, from a marketing perspective, they probably know how to do this. They just never really took the time to actually get it together. So we're creating them, and if they want to, they can hire us to do, the back end and actually do all the dirty work for them, the hard work of actually creating all this stuff. Or they can just hire us to say, hey, this is how you do it. Here's your plan. You guys execute it. And some of them are really looking more at that kind of a model. And then the third leg of that we're looking at is just like John did with, and I hate to kind of use him over and over and over again, but he's kind of like now almost the godfather of the podcasting industry. He was just in Forbes magazine, I saw, which was kind of cool. So, but he and others like him who are at the top of their game have helped to teach other people how to podcast successfully and how to monetize it. So there are plenty of people in the medical tourism industry, like medical tourism facilitators, for example, who are kind of like travel agents who help people, find a good medical facility to go to in a different country for a particular type of procedure. Many of them have a lot of training in the medical area, and they're really good at what they do. They just aren't really experts at marketing. So we're actually talking about putting together a course, and we've been approached by a couple of umbrella organizations. Would we be willing to create a course that would be under their umbrella, and we would do some kind of revenue share, or we maybe just do our own, just like John did with Podcasters Paradise, where it's basically, hey, medical tourism marketing, kind of a thing specifically for medical tourism facilitators or others in that particular niche. And that's very niche down. And we would then, offer them, here's some, how-tos on how to set up your Facebook page, how to do the videos, how to do, all the kinds of things that they need to know that they're just not familiar with. And we could do either a one-off fee or a monthly fee for that. And again, we believe that there's good potential for monetizing in that market as well. And and hopefully helping them, get a better way to market than the way most of them are doing it right now, which is they're just kind of hoping that the people will kind of come into their pipeline for many of them.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So, and I think, like you say, for a lot of podcasters, getting sponsors and those types of things takes a little bit longer maybe, but you can start consulting pretty quickly, right? And that's one of the ways you've monetized right away is to start consulting with these companies through your niche, which is marketing, right? Or through your background, which is in marketing. So, podcast there again is a great way to indirectly monetize your other businesses by creating buzz and getting yourself out there to another audience. And I think that's probably the greatest way to start monetizing what you're doing right away. What about the JV marketing stuff? I mean, it seems like you like you said, your numbers really spiked when you started reaching out to some of these other medical professionals who had a large following. And I've talked to several marketers who have used sort of a joint venture approach, which is sort of what you're doing when you're interviewing people. You're kind of engaging in sort of a buzzworthy joint venture. Would you say that's probably the best way? Because I mean, you could do Twitter strategies, you could do all these things which all help and distribute your content. But if you can get on a list, get somebody on your show that's really rocking and has a huge following, and they share with their followers, all of a sudden, boom, right?
Yeah. I mean, I heard a statistic somewhere that said that like 95% of all podcasts never get past episode 6 or 7 on average. So, they're going to do once a week and they try, and after, 4, 5, 6 episodes, whatever, it just kind of falls off and they just don't follow up with it anymore. So if you're sending an interview request out to somebody who's famous in your niche, and they know anything about podcasting, they know that if you're sending them basically your unique selling proposition is, well, I'm about to start my podcast, they know there's about a 95% chance that it's never going to go anywhere. So I guess my best advice would be to, hey, reach as high as you can. Absolutely ask them. No is okay. You can ask them again. That doesn't mean no forever. It just means no today, right? So, reach for the stars, get as many people as you can, but start getting those numbers going. Get out there, put the content out there on a consistent basis, and then as you're getting this and building it, then you can go back to them and say, hey, look, I've got 25 episodes, and we've done this and then the other thing. We think you'd be a great fit. We'd love to have you on the show. And they may say no again, and that's fine, but use each one, the next bigger one as a stepping stone to get, up to the next one. And again, John used that strategy very, very well when he started, before he even launched, I think he did 40 or so episodes. And I think at one point, he kind of reached out and said, yeah, hey, I'm interested in having you on the show, Mr. X, and hey, Mr. Y and Z, and and Mr. A, these other three famous people have already come on the show and done their interview. So it gave him social proof, even though he hadn't even launched at that point yet. And for some of these, he went out and he met with them personally. He went to, Blog World and a couple of other big events. So if you can get out in person to an event, I mean, everyone gets a million emails every day and we ignore most of them. So if you have the ability, of course, all of us do, just call the person, get a hold of their assistant or the individual, call them, talk to them personally, go to an event where they're going to be, get in front of them, shake their hand, talk to them, tell them what you're doing and working on. You got a much better chance of landing a big time interview doing it that way than you do just sending out a bunch of random emails. It's just really hard to communicate in that fashion and try and get somebody who's really big to come on your show when you're just getting started just by sending out an email request.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, John, I think we dropped a lot of good content today here for our listeners, and so let's just have you leave us with one piece of advice. If you had to pick something that's extremely important for somebody who wants to start, grow, and monetize their podcast, what would that be? And then share a little bit about where our listeners and viewers can find out more about you, and then we'll wrap things up.
Sure. I think for a lot of people, the mindset, I know you've heard this a million times, Tony Robbins talks about it, everyone's heard this all before, but you really just kind of have to commit. You have to say, I'm going to do this, and there's a million excuses for why you can delay this. Well, I didn't get the right microphone, or I didn't get this, or I didn't get that, or I need to ask and find out about this and that. Get your information together, put it together. I mean, if we can do this and basically start recording from the day we said go to the day we did our first interview was about 3.5 weeks. And then we were still refining and changing things and doing things up until the point of launch, and then continued on from there. So I guess, for me, the biggest thing is take massive action and don't allow that feeling of, well, I'm an imposter, that kind of imposter feeling that, hey, it doesn't matter if you're an expert in the field or not. The people that you're interviewing are. So take the action and just don't take no for an answer. Some people are going to say no, and that's fine, but just move on to the next one and then maybe go back and revisit them later. So I'm not sure if that really answers the question that you were asking, but to me, that's the biggest thing that I see is I see a lot of hesitation and, well, I didn't do this and I didn't do that and I need to do this and you're doing all this stuff, I need to do all this stuff. No, just pick a niche and go there and get started.
Right. And where can our viewers find out more about you?
Sure. You can listen to the podcast at healthcareelsewhere.com. There's show notes on all the pages, of course. You can learn more about all the people that are there. And we have a little about page and everything. And then if you're interested in contacting me personally, you can just go to johncote.net, and that forwards to whatever our most recent website is that we're dealing with. I'm happy to answer questions about podcasting or marketing or whatever, and, really anything that we can do to help your listeners out. But for us, really, it's all about, provide the value. You just put it out there. Again, we were nobody in the healthcare space, in the medical tourism space, just 10 weeks ago, and all of a sudden now here we are. We're basically the world's most popular medical tourism podcast. So yeah, if you'd like, we'd love to see if you have a chance, listen to a show. If you like it, give us a review. We're always looking for reviews on iTunes or wherever, and that would be great. All
right, sounds good. Thanks so much, John, for coming on and sharing all that wonderful knowledge with us. So. Yeah, I think that was perfect. Just start, right? Just get started on your podcast. And personally, my experience has been that there's not a better way to build your network. I mean, that's one of the biggest ways is through podcasting. I've chosen to do video because I just feel like I've done a lot of video. You've done a lot of video, and there's a lot of ways to really get the audience to feel you and see you in a whole different level through video. So I think that's something to consider as well, because you can always repurpose the video into audio as well and into text.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's very few video podcasts percentage-wise, so it's a great play to make in the first place. I love the fact that you're doing it. We chose audio only just because it was just easier to produce, and so I was kind of lazy, I guess.
No. Yeah, I don't think I could. I would be dying if I put out a once a day video interview or even an audio interview. So kudos to you. It's a lot of work to put out content, but it's a really amazing vehicle. So for any of you out there who are looking to start a podcast, just do it. If you need some help, reach out to John, reach out to myself. We'd be happy to give you some tips and pointers about how to get the ball rolling and take action on that. So I hope you all enjoyed this conversation. Again, head over to newwavehealthcare.com if you want to check us out. If you're listening to this on iTunes or Stitcher, again, check us out over there, newwavehealthcare.com. You can just simply put in John's name, the name John, into our search bar, and his show notes page will pop right up. So I hope you enjoyed that. I'll see you on the next one.